Hey dreamer, welcome to your history lunch break. Today we're entering a world where lunch is a test you didn't study for. Introductions, conversation traps, and a cutlery set that looks like it came with legal consequences. Welcome to a Victorian luncheon. Yes, a luncheon. That polite word hides an emotional obstacle course of lace gloves, moral panic, and cucumber-based danger. Because this isn't just a casual midday meal. Oh no. This is a battlefield of glances, gossip, and gelatinous meats. It is where reputations are made, ruined, or left gently sweating under a doily. Before you bite into anything, take a second to like this video and subscribe. Or double check if you are subscribed already. Your support means more than you think. And drop a comment where you're listening from and what your favourite history topic is. Maybe we'll dive into that soon. Have you ever sat through a lunch where the food is secondary and the real meal is being watched? Have you ever smiled through introductions while secretly panicking about titles, ranks, and who you're allowed to address first? Have you ever tried to eat something with seeds, crumbs, or sauce, knowing one drop on a glove could haunt you for years? Well, congratulations, you've just arrived in England, 1878, and you've been invited to a Victorian luncheon. Enjoy, or should I say, good luck. You wake up to the sound of bells, not cheerful church bells, not pleasant chimes. These are nervous bells, luncheon bells. Somewhere downstairs a maid is boiling something aggressively. Someone else is yelling about gloves. You lie in bed for one last moment of peace, knowing full well it is your final moment of the day. Today is the luncheon, the one that could define your social survival until at least harvest season. You sit up, already regretting your entire personality. There's a dress laid out, pale lavender, allegedly flattering, potentially fatal. It buttons up the back, requires structural undergarments, and has opinions about posture. A corset waits beside it, smiling like a trap. You breathe in, once, then twice. Two maids wrestle you into the corset while offering emotional support in the form of unsolicited opinions. The bodice is too tight, the hem is too long, the colour might be ambitious. You're a vision, or a warning, possibly both. You attempt breakfast, a single slice of dry toast and 3 sips of broth. Anything more and you risk digestive betrayal during the second course. You chew slowly, as if each bite is a legal risk. Someone brings you a hat, it's tasteful. Or it was, 2 seasons ago. You nod gravely and pin it to your head like a promise you intend to break. A small note arrives on a silver tray. It is a reminder of the luncheon's location, time, and precise social weight. There is a list of other attendees. You scan the names. One of them once accused someone of vulgar button choices. Another allegedly cries at the sight of imperfect aspic. You tuck the list into your sleeve. Knowledge is power, also padding. You're escorted to the carriage like a sacrificial offering. The driver gives you a nod that could mean good luck or goodbye. You settle onto the seat, careful not to wrinkle, bend, or breathe too deeply. The carriage jolts forward and you immediately regret everything you've ever eaten. The streets are muddy, naturally. You pass children with smudged faces and dogs with more freedom than you. You envy them deeply. A man selling eels shouts something in your direction. You pretend not to hear. You focus on your breathing, which is now mostly symbolic. Your gloves feel too tight. Your shawl is slipping. The carriage window fogs up with a gentle threat. You try to remember your conversational plan. Safe topics include weather, flowers, local disasters, and lace. Avoid politics, strong opinions, or anything that might imply you have read a book. A sudden jolt sends your reticule flying. You grab it before it spills your emergency handkerchiefs and backup compliments. Outside, the gas lamps flicker like nervous eyebrows. The fog thickens. You hope someone lights a fire under the soup. You hope no one remembers that thing you said about sardines last month. The wheels hit a cobblestone. You bounce. Your hat shifts. Your dignity slides slightly to the left. The driver mutters something to the horses. They ignore him. So do you. You close your eyes and count to 10. You do not make it to 3 before another jolt reminds you that your corset owns your spine now. You check your reflection in a tiny mirror. You look presentable, almost powerful, like a woman who could pass a cutlery quiz and remember 5 surnames under pressure. The carriage slows. The townhouse is just ahead. Its windows glow like judgment. You swallow. You smile. You sit up straight. It is time. The carriage lurches to a stop in front of a cream-coloured townhouse, with the kind of architectural confidence only possessed by the deeply repressed. You step out, already sweating, though it is barely spring and you haven't even moved. The butler opens the door with the enthusiasm of a man who has met your kind before. Inside waits a hallway of mirrors, ferns, and silent servants, and so begins the gauntlet. You must greet 17 people, remember 23 names, and make 0 conversational mistakes before someone even hands you a plate. Welcome to the luncheon. You're already under scrutiny. Your shoes squeak across the polished floor like a tiny betrayal. The air smells of violets, wax, and anxiety. A maid takes your cloak and a measurable portion of your self-worth. You smooth your skirt, pat your hair, and briefly forget how breathing works. A gentleman steps forward and asks about your aunt. You do not have an aunt. You say she is improving. You are steered into the drawing room, where the lighting is soft enough to flatter, but bright enough to expose judgment. The guests have arranged themselves in conversational clusters, like competing flower arrangements. You scan the room for a friendly face. You find none. A woman with a brooch shaped like a screaming cherub nods at you. You nod back, unsure whether you've been acknowledged or warned. A man in a suit that smells faintly of mothballs and authority introduces himself. His name is either Gregory or Gerard. You smile and agree with something he says about the fog. This is a mistake. It was not simply fog, it was sombre fog. A second woman joins. You are now in a conversational triangle, a trap. The topics are limited to lilies, mist, and the moral decay of someone's niece. You say the roses seem early this year. They are not. They are precisely on time. You have committed a seasonal offence. You begin a strategic retreat but are intercepted by a tray of lukewarm sherry. It tastes like raisins soaked in disappointment. You nod politely while silently begging your glass to refill itself with competence. You hover briefly near a fern, too relaxed. You shift beside a piano, too eager. You end up beside a column, hoping to radiate elegance and mild mystery. You mostly radiate humidity. Voices drift through the room like smoke. Laughter erupts from a group discussing embroidery. You consider joining, but remember you once sewed a button onto your collarbone. A man with a monocle passes by and mutters something disapproving about salmon. You murmur agreement and silently vow to avoid seafood forever. Then comes the sound everyone dreads. The maid clears her throat. The room stills. The hostess is approaching. You turn too quickly and bump a side table. A spoon clinks. A drop of sherry darkens the carpet. You stare forward like it wasn't you. The spoon is retrieved. The carpet remains wounded. The hostess enters, wrapped in silk and power. Her smile is both invitation and warning. She greets you with a kiss that hovers near your cheek. She says your name like she's reading it off a list of debts. You curtsy. It is acceptable. Not admired, not mocked. Simply logged. She glides away. You exhale. You are one step closer to the table, one step closer to safety, or so you think. The luncheon has not even begun, and already your neckline is suspicious, your opinion of the fog is socially unstable, and your dignity is clinging to the inside of a sherry glass. This is only the beginning. The hostess announces the seating arrangement with the gravity of a royal decree. Your name is called. You are placed between a colonel who only speaks in cricket metaphors and a widow who collects antique dental tools. The chairs are too close. The table is too long. The centerpiece is mostly cabbage. You are instructed not to sit until the hostess sits. She does not sit. She circles the room like a hawk wearing silk. Your knees begin to lock. The colonel clears his throat. The widow examines your ring finger. The tension is edible. The soup is not. A footman gestures toward your seat with the silent despair of a man who has seen too many elbows in the wrong places. You approach the chair carefully, as if it might be booby-trapped, which in a way it is. The placement says everything. Too close to the hostess and you are a threat. Too far and you are forgettable. You're exactly 3 seats down, just important enough to be watched, not important enough to be forgiven. The chair is a dark wood monstrosity with clawed feet and opinions. You are to hover beside it until given the sacred signal. This is not optional. Sitting prematurely would mark you as reckless. You remain upright, spine straight, elbows cautiously at your sides. The colonel mutters something about wickets. You nod politely and immediately regret it. The widow sighs through her nose. Across the table, guests are murmuring in stiff, polite tones. You catch the words duck moose and unfortunate niece. Someone adjusts their napkin before sitting. Another guest pretends to admire the centerpiece. It is a towering arrangement of cabbage, lilies, and something purple that might be ornamental kale or emotional damage. The scent is floral with undertones of soup panic. The hostess glides past again. Her gown rustles like incoming weather. She stops to compliment a baroness's lace cuffs and casually destroys a countess's self-worth with a comment about last season's colour palette. You remain silent, still standing. Your knees make a quiet noise that might be surrender. No one notices, or worse, they do. Suddenly the hostess stops. She adjusts her glove. A footman adjusts a chair that does not need adjusting. She lifts her eyes, scans the room, and with the grace of an executioner slowly lowers herself into her chair. It has begun. You sit carefully, silently, landing on the edge of the chair as if you might need to flee. The colonel lands with a grunt. The widow descends like royalty into exile. Chairs scrape softly across the floor. The room is filled with the sound of disciplined discomfort. Before you are 5 utensils, 4 glasses, 2 napkins, and 1 small card with your name written in a calligraphy style known only to the very patient and the very bored. You adjust the napkin. No, too soon. You leave it. The colonel begins explaining the strategic brilliance of the 1843 Ashes match. You do not know what that is. You pretend you do. A footman passes by, refilling water. You nod. He nods. Nothing is said. Everything is communicated. The widow is now polishing her fork with a handkerchief embroidered with what might be skulls or small poodles. You are not sure which is worse. You glance across the table and make eye contact with someone who once publicly corrected your pronunciation of the word Worcestershire. You look away. You are still pretending not to exist. You adjust your posture. You remember to breathe. Soup arrives. pale, thin, suspiciously beige. You are handed a spoon that looks identical to all the other spoons. You pretend to know which one to use. You do not. You mimic the widow's movements. She's a professional. You, meanwhile, are trying not to inhale parsley. No slurping, no blowing, no actual enjoyment. You sip with the reverence of someone tasting pond water under surveillance. A conversation about weather begins. It lasts 14 minutes. You say the sky looked bluish. This is a mistake. Apparently it was wistfully lavender. Your mistake is noted. The soup remains untouched. You are 80% sweat. The spoon trembles slightly in your hand, but you force your wrist to remain steady. You stir once. That seems polite. You take another sip, so cautiously it barely counts. The flavour is subtle, which is to say, non-existent. If temperature were a taste, it would be this soup. It's not hot enough to scald, but far too warm to trust. You swallow. You survive. Across the table, someone makes a comment about cloud formations. A small murmur of agreement follows. You nod as if you have personally corresponded with clouds. You are about to say something neutral when the widow tilts her head and raises one eyebrow. You retreat. Silence is safety. To your left, the Colonel has begun narrating a recent fox hunt in agonizing detail. He gestures with his spoon, dangerously close to launching a parsnip into orbit. You shift your chair half an inch away. He does not notice. He is too busy recalling the exact angle at which a fox turned left near a hedge. A server materializes behind you. You stiffen. A basket of bread is offered. You hesitate. Which piece is safest? You select a roll that looks sturdy and emotionally stable. You place it on your side plate. You do not touch it. Bread must not be approached before the hostess. The bread is a test. You glance down at your place setting. Forks to the left, spoons to the right, a small army of knives above. Each piece of silverware has a specific purpose and an unspoken threat attached to its misuse. You eye a fork that looks slightly thinner than the others. You suspect it is for fish or vengeance. The soup is halfway gone. You're not sure if you should feel proud or alarmed. You've matched your pace with the widow, who has only paused once to politely dissect a rogue bay leaf. She has not spilled. She has not sighed. She is clearly a trained professional, possibly raised in a convent of cutlery. A gentleman 3 seats away attempts to engage you in conversation. He begins a sentence with the words, atmospheric density. You panic. You nod slowly, as if pondering density. He seems satisfied. You sip more soup to fill the silence. The hostess lifts her bread. She eats. This is your cue. It's now safe to proceed. You double-check that your napkin is still in your lap and not clinging to your sleeve like a desperate ghost. You exhale slowly. You are performing well enough to go unnoticed, which is the only real goal. The Colonel has dropped his spoon. He recovers it with the speed of a man who has made this mistake before. A butler replaces it anyway, appearing from the shadows like a ghost with a monogrammed towel. The incident is logged silently in everyone's memory. The Colonel carries on, undeterred. You finish your soup just as the hostess sets down her spoon. Timing is everything. A server removes your bowl. You smile faintly, not out of pleasure, but relief. 1 course down, 8 or 9 more to go. No one tells you the exact number. That would be merciful. A mound of chicken, aspic, and something called summer pickle is gently lowered onto your plate. It jiggles. You don't. You are frozen in polite horror. There is a carrot suspended in gelatin like a crime scene exhibit. You glance at the Colonel. He attacks his with the enthusiasm of a man avenging his youth. The widow slices hers into cubes like a magician who hates rabbits. You try to follow suit. The texture is both crunchy and wet. It tastes of lemon and confusion. A footman refills your wine. You pretend it's courage. You chew with the solemnity of a courtroom witness. The gelatin gleams in the candlelight with a sinister sheen, quivering slightly every time someone at the table shifts in their seat. It smells faintly of vinegar, poultry, and structural ambition. You take another bite because the alternative is starvation or social collapse. A decorative sprig of parsley has lodged itself beneath the chicken, looking less like a garnish and more like a hostage. You prod it gently with your fork, unsure if engaging with it will imply hunger, rebellion, or desperation. You decide to let it be. It has suffered enough. To your left, the Colonel is now explaining the rules of a sport that involves wickets, tea breaks, and eternal boredom. He uses his fork as a pointer. You nod as if any of it makes sense. You take another sip of wine. It tastes of berries and denial. The woman across from you dabs delicately at the corners of her mouth with her napkin after every bite. Her expression is serene, bordering on vacant, like someone who has simply chosen to ascend spiritually away from the concept of aspic. You are envious. You make the mistake of chewing too quickly. A piece of cucumber trapped in the jelly resists with a springy vengeance. You smile anyway. You must appear content. You must appear composed. You must not, under any circumstances, let anyone see you question the legitimacy of chicken in jelly. The centre of your plate contains a small mound of summer pickle. It is brightly coloured and possibly sentient. You spear a piece with your fork and attempt to identify the flavour. It tastes of mustard, sugar, and unresolved trauma. You nod thoughtfully. A nearby guest sees your nod and mirrors it. You are now complicit in the lie. The widow finishes her plate with chilling efficiency and folds her hands in her lap like someone awaiting sentencing. You are only halfway through. You attempt to make your portion appear smaller through strategic rearrangement. You push one piece of jelly over another. The mound regroups, unbothered. The hostess laughs lightly at something someone said about a bishop and a soufflé. Everyone joins in with the exact same volume of polite mirth. You laugh too. You don't know why. You're trying to chew celery encased in gelatin without making noise. Your soul exits your body briefly. You glance down at your wine glass. It is full again. The footman has refilled it while you are distracted by a pickled beetroot with too much personality. You take a long, slow sip. The room becomes fuzzier at the edges. This helps. Across the table, someone has stopped eating. Their plate still contains a fully intact slice of the aspic tower. A butler hovers behind them like a quiet threat. You press on. You manage one more bite of the chicken, which tastes like regret and cloves. You rest your fork. You lean back half an inch. You look neutral. Your plate is not clean, but it is respectable. That will have to do. The aspic jiggles once more before being cleared. You avoid eye contact with it. By the next course, you've lost all sense of time and identity. The hostess brings up someone's scandalous garden party. A countess mentions someone else's hemline. You're asked your opinion about French tailoring. You panic and say, it seems tailored. There is a pause. A long one. The Colonel blinks. The widow sets down her fork. Somewhere someone coughs. You pivot to safer ground. You mention peonies. Peonies are neutral. No one can weaponize a peony. Probably. The conversation resumes. You survived. Barely. You sip your water like it's laudanum. Across the table, a baronet launches into a monologue about his gout. You nod respectfully, the way one might acknowledge a storm forming on the horizon. He describes it in detail. There are metaphors. You learn more about his toes than you ever wished to. A woman next to him counters with a story about her cousin's bee allergy. Someone sighs. Someone else fans themselves. You consider collapsing gently under the table and pretending to faint. The colonel tries to steer the conversation toward foxes again. The widow redirects him with a single sharp look. Instead, he brings up the hunting habits of swans. You're not sure if that's accurate or a metaphor. You smile vaguely and chew a piece of asparagus that tastes like guilt. You are now in a conversational loop. Safe topics cycle endlessly. Weather, gardens, stationery, the health of minor relatives. Anything more personal is a risk. Anything political is fatal. Someone mentions the railway. A murmur of agreement ripples down the table. You take a small sip of wine and realize you've been drinking steadily for an hour. Not enough to be noticed. Just enough to dull the edges. The colonel begins to explain the structural weaknesses of a competing luncheon he attended last month. The napkins were starched too heavily. The aspic was unstable. A guest had worn visible buttons. You attempt to contribute something bland and inoffensive. You mention the quality of candlelight this evening. The hostess glances at you, nods slightly, and moves on. It is both approval and dismissal. You take it as a win. The widow is now quietly humming while slicing her remaining vegetables into exact thirds. To your right, a duchess recounts a story involving a bishop, a ladder, and an unfortunate misunderstanding about embroidery. It sounds important. You miss the point. You nod anyway and mutter something about linen. She seems pleased, or at least uninterested in correcting you. Someone drops a fork. The entire table flinches. A footman replaces it with the speed of a man trained in emergencies. No one acknowledges the incident. It has already been buried deep in collective memory, where it will be recalled only in future passive-aggressive toasts. You are asked about your favourite flower. You say something about dahlias. This is risky. The widow once lost a cousin to a dahlia-related dispute. She narrows her eyes. You pivot. You add that peonies are also very dependable. The colonel nods approvingly. Crisis averted. You glance toward the end of the table where the hostess is now quietly dissecting a guest's hat with words that sound kind but are shaped like daggers. Everyone listens. Everyone smiles. Everyone is terrified. You sit very still. You say very little. You chew carefully and try not to exist too enthusiastically, because in this room, one misplaced adjective can undo an entire season of strategic silence. You're not here to enjoy yourself. You are here to survive. And survival requires absolute conversational discipline. A towering trifle arrives, trembling with custard, cream, and social tension. You're expected to admire it, discuss it, and consume exactly the correct amount. Too little, and you are ungrateful. Too much, and you are unrefined. You stare at the trifle for a moment longer than necessary. It shimmers slightly in the light, like a dessert that knows it's being judged. There is a sugared violet perched on top. You are not sure if it is edible or merely decorative. You eat it anyway. It tastes like perfume and consequence. Conversation around the table shifts to dessert-safe topics. The price of lace, the decline of butter quality. Someone mentioned someone else's third cousin who was seen purchasing jam alone. Scandalous. You nod and make a vague sound that suggests both empathy and astonishment. No one asks you to elaborate, thankfully. The hostess rises halfway out of her chair. which triggers a synchronized flurry of napkin folding, final sips, and posture correction. She does not leave the table. She simply hovers, a warning, a foreshadowing, a test. She sits back down. You pretend you never moved. Someone coughs discreetly. A footman appears at your elbow and offers tea with the gravity of a priest offering confession. You accept. It is milky, lukewarm, and completely harmless. You take small sips while watching a nearby guest drop a sugar cube with the precision of a military maneuver. No one uses more than one. 2 implies recklessness. 3 is considered deeply French. A quiet hush settles over the table, the natural lull of an event winding down but not yet ending. A lady to your left begins the farewell dance. She stands slowly, announces her impending departure, then lingers. She speaks to the hostess, then the hostess's neighbour, then returns to her chair briefly before standing again. This is normal. You are now entering the goodbye spiral. There is no clear exit, only loops. You glance toward the door. It looks farther away than before. A footman retrieves a shawl. Another helps someone with their gloves. A gentleman makes a vague comment about the air quality. This is code for he is ready to go but too polite to bolt. You envy him. You say your first goodbye. It is met with another conversation, then a second goodbye, then a curtsy, then a brief story about someone's cat, then another goodbye. You nod, curtsy again, and say something soft about the weather. Everyone agrees. It has been unusually atmospheric. You thank the hostess for such a lovely luncheon, even though your spine is currently negotiating its resignation. She smiles warmly and replies that it was such a pleasure, which in Victorian means she will remember everything you did for the rest of your natural life. At last your name is retrieved by the butler. He gives a subtle nod. Permission has been granted. You make your way to the hall, one tiny step at a time, as though leaving too quickly might trigger a trap. Your gloves are located. Your wrap is secured. A final nod from the hostess seals your departure. You exit the house with all the grace of someone who has not flexed a toe in 3 hours. You sink into the carriage like a discarded puppet and close your eyes. The door shuts behind you. The driver clicks to the horses. The wheels begin to turn, and as the townhouse fades behind you into gaslight and mist, you allow yourself the smallest, most forbidden of luxuries. You exhale. For the first time all day, you are no longer being watched. Congratulations, you've survived a Victorian luncheon.